Hello, folks. My wife's got to shut the door here, and we can. Thanks, wifey. Okay. I guess now I can get to preaching. So anyway, let's see. What's this going to be? Well, it's going to be another one of those history typology sermons. Okay. So. And I'd say that there is a good chance that by the end of this one, that if I had any friends left, I will not have any friends left. So, but that's fine. That's the way I like it. I was thinking earlier about how much that I would rather to be free to think whatever I want to think, and so anyway, I'll try to get into this as fast as I can. Sometimes it's a little hard. Sometimes it's a little hard just to get straight into it. But I would like to ask people surrounding this message. But basically, the theme of this is going to be that my views on history and America and lots of different things are quite different than most of my contemporaries' views upon these things. And thereby, my views upon the spiritual situation, the message as it stands, is also quite different than my contemporaries, because the whole general way I look at things is just different than the way they look at it. And it's to me, the natural and the spiritual are an exact type of each other. So it stands to reason that a lot of people have the viewpoints that they do on things, because in the spiritual, that is, because of their viewpoints in the natural. And so anyway, I'll just see if I can get into it. It blows me away how gullible people are. But I suppose if they weren't gullible, then, well, we wouldn't be where we're at. So I'll just take something that's very basic and simple to really anybody who, let's say you're level 1, 2, or 3, you might say enlightened on general things. I'm not even saying you're a high level enlightened person, but really low level would be low level probably in on the scale of real enlightenment, if you could call it that. But it blows me away as to how gullible that people are, and even people surrounding this message. And that surprises me even more, in that these are the same people that come out from the message. These were people who began to be skeptics of the spiritual system as it was and came out of it. And I just find it amazing that that seems to be as far as it went for some people. And they didn't seem to continue on with, it's like, okay, yeah, the message was, we know that it was rotten, but, that there were some issues there, but nobody ever seemed to apply that to much of anything else. Whenever I came out, and I guess I was always a bit of a skeptic or whatever, but whenever I came out of all that stuff, I'm not saying I did the best job at it, but I always, generally after a while, after thinking about something, I would or whatever we had moved on to, whether it was any kind of thinking, but in the spiritual, eventually I would start to think, hey, wait a minute, if what we did there was we came out, we realized that something was not what we were told it was, and we came out of it, then is there more we need to reconsider and come out of? So I'll just start with this. I got to go into the natural to explain what I want to say in the spiritual. It blows me away, and I cannot believe how gullible people are. The idea that they think that their vote matters. It's, I'm talking natural politics here, okay? And this is a little bit of extension of last week, but I'm going to explain it in better detail. Why? This blows my mind. And I don't understand why, I seem to be the only one saying this. It blows my mind that there should be others. It's so easy to see. You'd think that there ought to be a thousand others saying the same thing at least. But you have to understand, when this country was founded, like I said last time, historically, the people on top had the right to, they had voting privileges, okay, essentially was how it worked. Okay, and then eventually it got down to where, men of all sorts had the right to vote, then women got the right to vote. Women didn't even have the right to vote, So, and then eventually there was women's suffrage, and then women got the right to vote, okay? So eventually now everybody has the right to vote. It's not just a select few now. It's everybody has the right to vote, okay? So what happened was in our own country, in the past 250 years of history of our own country, it went from power being in the hands of a select few to theoretically power being in the hands of all, because all had the right to vote. All have the right to vote now. Okay, all right. So here's the gullible part. Why? Okay, let me say this. You got to realize that this is American history. This is not even European history. This is not the old church and the old feudal system and all the old message and everything, church ages and all that. Okay, we're talking about just purely America here. And we know that the American Revolution was essentially the typology of the third coming and on up revolution of things. Okay, so we're talking purely from there on up. We ain't even talking about the old stuff no more. I'm talking about purely what happened with us. Okay, so what happened was in the beginning you had George Washington, and George Washington is fighting against King George of England. Okay, so George against George, and so George Washington, the Americans win enough to get the British to lay off, essentially, and form their own country. And then George Washington and all those guys, all the bigwigs, had the power to vote. Okay, so, but it was all done, the whole theme of the thing was done under the guise that, hey, if you fight in this revolution against the old country, then, hey, everybody's going to have power. It's not just going to be power in the hands of a few. Okay, all right. That was utter, complete horse crap. That was never going to happen. And I don't understand why anybody would be gullible enough to believe that would ever happen. Okay. So now, I'm not saying that this wasn't meant to be, for lack of better terms, because there was all those stories, and I tend to think that there was probably something true to it about, George Washington had these supernatural occurrences like things, and I don't really think supernatural is supernatural. I think it's just part of the script. I think we need to look at that totally differently. Whenever we say, oh, well, this is some sort of a holy thing, that this happened. Well, I think it just happened because it was time for it to happen, really. So whatever was going on there, it's just time for it to happen. And um, that's a anyway. In the beginning, theoretically, the idea was good. That's sort of the short version of it. But so anyway, let me move on here, and I can explain this a little better. What I'm trying to get at. So what you had was you had the right to vote in the hands of a few American bigwigs. Okay, one of the very first things that happened after the revolution was fought, and you can look this up, and I may not tell it exactly, but you can look it up, there was a thing called the Whiskey Rebellion. It was like, I think 10 years, not 10 years probably removed after the revolution was over. George Washington, I think, was president at the time. So what happened was there was some guys in western Pennsylvania that were making whiskey, and I guess they were making it kind of outside of the framework of the American government, and they were using it, I think, they were trading whiskey as like currency. They were not using the American currency. They were using whiskey as currency, and making their own whiskey, and which was a no-no. You couldn't make your own whiskey. So anyway, what happened was, and these were the same guys that were doing that. These are the same guys who had undoubtedly fought in the Revolution alongside of George Washington against the old country. Okay, so what happens is George Washington and a bunch and the bigwigs from Philadelphia, or whatever the capital was at the time, send a armed force into western Pennsylvania to quell the Whiskey Rebellion. Okay, so the very first act, basically, military act that was ever performed was to spit in the face of the concept of why we fought against the old country in the first place. Okay, which was to not be taxed, and et cetera, and not be controlled by these feudal lords. So anyway, we come over here, and our bigwigs, the first thing they do is spit in the face of those who just helped them fighting against what that they claimed that they were fighting for. Okay, which shows that the whole thing was baloney. But anyway, see, I have a different worldview on things, and that is very much the reason as to why I have a very different opinion on the spiritual situation than most people do out here. But on with the story. So anyway, whenever I don't want to exactly say, let me put a little bit of a disclaimer out here. I don't want to exactly say that that the whole thing was total loss or total baloney, because I don't want to say it was total baloney, because I don't know. I debate whether it was total baloney or whether it wasn't total baloney. That's pretty much where I'm at. I can't say one way or another whether this whole thing was just complete baloney or 50% baloney or what. But I do know that it turned out to be a heck of a lot more baloney than most people are realizing. So I'll just put it at that. And as to what percentage of baloney it was, well, now I think it's 100% baloney. In the beginning, that's more debatable. So take that as it is. And that's pretty much the way I look at this, what the message has become now. In the beginning, it was debatable as to whether, it was more debatable as to whether it was baloney or not. And it was just debatable. But now it's just 100% pure baloney. Is what our message has devolved into. So I didn't come here to debate the beginning. I came here to talk about what it is now. And let me explain to you how it works. In the beginning, the bigwigs had the right to vote. Okay, so over time it got to be where everybody had the right to vote. Because, see, we were just coming out of the idea of, the king had all the power and the feudal lords and stuff. Well, the idea that a few wealthy landowners, at very least from Virginia and Pennsylvania and a few places, could rebel against the king was pretty amazing. Okay, so you could say that was pretty amazing, and that was kind of the third coming theme, was that basically what it was in spiritual terms, it was some wealthy guys, essentially, some semi-upper crust colonists of the Great Message Empire, Great Mess Age Empire, that saw an opportunity. I believe that it was just time for it. However, to break away from the king. Okay, so then what they did was they broke away from the Mess Age and formed the Spiritual United States, or the Third Coming, and so then you had those guys who were the upper crust of. They weren't as upper crust to say, whatever, but whatever they came out of. But hey, these were guys these were preachers that were firmly established in the message, that broke away and made the Third Coming. Okay, and what they had was they had a bunch of people that were that thought that it was going to be that everybody would have a say so. So anyway, what happened was of course they didn't necessarily want that to happen. Of course they didn't want that to happen at all. That was never part of the plan. What happened was you all have been completely duped. I use that word again, duped. Okay, what happened was that whenever they took the voting rights from the rich landowners that started this country, essentially, and made it to where eventually everybody had the right to vote. Sounds a lot like our, everybody's God idea, right? Okay. Whenever they did that, those rich landowners never had any intention of giving common people, and I don't, in America, or, just because this was the idea of America, don't mean crap. Okay, they never had any intention, those rich landowners that started this thing, never had any intention ever of sharing power with what would be essentially to them common Americans. Okay, never. But what they did was, and I don't understand how that you all are so gullible that you can't see this. It's so obvious. What, you think a bunch of rich landowners are going to just be like, oh, let's give everybody power, let's give everybody the right to vote, and then everybody will have power, and our power will be essentially diminished? Are you crazy? They're not going to do that. What happened was as it turned out, as everybody ended up with the right to vote, what they did was they made it to where the right to vote is practically useless. The right to vote doesn't do any good towards since the common person in America now, not just the rich people, but the rich landowners, whatever, but the common people in the United States now, they've made it to where that their vote is useless. It will not determine, it does not affect, you can go out and vote and it's just a waste of time because it does not affect your ability to towards affecting your own destiny, essentially. It's not going to have anything to do with it. Zero effect whatsoever. Because what they did was so that they could stay in power, they made sure that, they realized, well, hey, we got to give everybody the vote because this is not going to last for forever. Eventually, as time went on, things evolved and people were like, oh, well, we got to have the right to vote, natural progression of things. But what they did was as they gave everybody the right to vote, they also made sure that right to vote would be worthless, that they would stay in power, that they have all the power, and that the right to vote is completely worthless. Okay, you've got the right to vote now. Or in other words, you're all gods now. That was the American Revolution, the idea that you're all gods now. We don't answer to some feudal lord in Jeffersonville, Indiana, or the feudal or the king in Buckingham Palace, do we? Okay, but what happened was they made sure they took away all the power that vote had. They gave you the right to vote, and they took away all the power that the vote had. So your vote, even though everybody's got the right to vote now, but it has no power. They made sure that it would not, they weaved it in such a way to where that vote would never affect anything. It would never have any effect on your future. Okay, it's powerless. It's completely powerless. And because why are you all so gullible to think that they were going to give up power? That never happens. Why? Why would anybody think that? How stupid how stupid are the people surrounding the message here? How stupid are these regular Americans? Why would you think that a bunch of rich landowners are going to give up power? That's insanity. I don't know why this is so hard. I don't know why it blows my mind that I would even have to preach this to you all. You all are the same people that came out from the message. People that were able to think, okay, at that time in some regard. And yet I would have to preach this. This is obvious. So anyway, and I'll give you several examples of this, some of which are completely blatant, okay? So anyway, everybody's got the right to vote now, okay? Or in spiritual message terms, everybody is God now, okay? So everybody has the right to form their own destiny as they see fit, or to pursue happiness, the American blah, 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 the American dream, etc., etc. Whatever, however you want to sell it. But they've made it to where that the people that are placed there for you to vote for, it's not going to affect anything. The agenda is going to move on. The people that are in power, their agenda is going to move on. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. They just stuck those people there to placate you, to make you think that you're powerful now that you got to vote. And it's the same thing in the spiritual message. They have got these people. It's a placement of. They make you think that because you have the spiritual right to vote, or that you are also God's now, because it used to be that, only the rich landowners, only the certain preachers and certain pastors, and they had the right to vote, but you didn't have the right to vote. Commoners didn't have the right to vote. Whatever. Okay. But now everybody's got the right to vote. Okay. What they did was they not only did they make it to where they fixed it in such a way so that they would never lose power. They fixed it in such a way that your vote doesn't even matter. But also, they used the concept of everybody having a vote as a means of control to keep them placated. Okay, because now you think, see, what the spiritual message is doing is today they are using the concept of everybody is God to placate them to the concept of this new message. And it's ridiculous. It's what they've done is their new means of control. So the means of control used to be that the king told you what to do, okay, back in the message days. And then we come over here and everybody started getting the right to vote, so everybody became gods, okay. Then what happened was now the means of control is essentially the liberal take on it. It's when I say liberal, democracy and voting and that concept is liberal compared to the old feudal way of looking at it. Okay, I don't mean liberal in sense of politics right now. That's not what I mean. But they have used this concept of that you have power, that you have the right to vote, that your vote counts. They use that as a way and means of controlling you. Just like the old king used to control everybody because he was the king and he made a decree and that was it. And you were controlled. Okay. And he said, bring me pen, bring me parchment. And he wrote it down on a piece of paper and he said, send this decree throughout all the land, and everybody had to obey it. Okay. Message times. Okay. But now, message in farther back. But now what they do is they said, oh no, we've had enough of this. We're going to start the third coming here. And then they come over here and said, well, we're eventually going to make it to where, okay, maybe in the beginning of the third coming, well, it was just a few of us that we realized that we were gods and blah blah blah, and then eventually everybody's understand this, and now we're just over here in the love divine, and it's really far out there, and now everybody's gods and everybody's got all this rights and this and that. That is nothing more than a means to control you. You don't have any rights. They've made sure that you don't have any rights. They still got control over you. The Lords that started this thing, this third coming love divine message, we're not going to give up power, okay? You have no power to do or say anything in this message. You have no right to form your own destiny, because they will make sure that you get shut down if you try to do that. That's exactly how it's been. Anybody that ever tried to do it, they got shut down, because those lords that started this thing were never going to give up power. Just like the American lords that started this thing, they were never going to give up power. So what they did was they made it to where everybody could vote. They said, oh, well, you guys are only ones that got the power, so we'll make it to where everybody's got the right to vote. But then they made the vote of none effect. What is that scripture? Something, you make the word of God of none effect, right? So anyway, that's exactly what's going on here. The fact that you are God, the fact that you have become God in this message is of none effect. The Lord still have power. Your right to vote, your right to do all this and whatever, the fact that you're God, that they gave you, they said, well, you're God. Okay, that's the same as the Americans saying, well, you got the right to vote. You've got the right to pick your own destiny. Okay, but they, it's a choice of two candidates, two pre-picked candidates, essentially, and neither one of them is going to affect anything, because the agenda is going to move forward regardless. It's got nothing to do with anything. And that's exactly how much power you have in the spiritual right now. You think you have power. You say, oh my goodness, we've been freed. We've got this message, third coming in love divine and all this stuff, and we've been freed now. We've got the right to vote and to choose our own destiny. Yeah, well, it's a load of crap, because you were never going to have any power. You were never going to have any power to say anything or do anything or to affect anything. And furthermore, they have used that as a means to control you. That's exactly what they've done. It's a modern denomination. It's a modern way of controlling you, because the old way was going out. The old way of the king telling everybody what to do, that was going out. Okay, that was going out of style. Then they came up with a new way and said, well, we'll make it a democracy, and we'll make it to where everybody, or a republic in the beginning and evolve more into a democracy, and we'll make it to where, everybody has the right to vote, and that's going to be the new thing, okay? But in doing that, they use that as the means to control you. That is the new way, the new denomination, the new way of controlling you. Then the United States is nothing but a modern denomination. Feudalism was a denomination. This, whatever we have here, is whatever you want to call it, is a denomination. Okay, we are a denomination. The United States is a denomination. Okay, it's a modern way of controlling your mind. Okay, the love divine, third coming odds and on, is nothing but a modern way to control your mind. That's all it is. And they said, we'll make these people have the right to vote, and it won't just be your count that votes, because I think I've told this joke before, but what's the difference between feudalism and democracy? The difference is that in feudalism, it was your count that votes, because the count was he was a feudal lord of sorts. So in feudalism, it was your count that votes. Let me say it this way. In democracy, it's your vote that counts. In feudalism, it's your count that votes. Okay, nothing changed. Okay, it just flipped. Okay, like I said, we're on the backside of the Bible now, so it just flipped. Okay, so what happened was it was the count. Your count, he had the right to vote for you. Okay, and then it came over here, and now everybody's got the right to vote, but you have no power. The count, well, he might have had some power in whatever he was voting for, but it was probably not going to be on the behalf of his constituency. Okay, he was voting on whatever he wanted. Okay, and that's what people got mad at. And you come over here, and the people have the right to vote now. They say in democracy it's your count that votes. Okay, well, or in democracy it's your vote that counts. Well, your vote don't count. Okay, your vote's worthless. They were never going to let you have any power, and you can go out and vote, and it won't do you any good. They've made sure that this will not do you any good. They were not going to give up power. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time, and I'll make that very clear, because some people are going to say, well, I don't know about that. They're not going to give up power. That's not how it works. Rich people, the people in power, they don't give up power. It just gets transferred down. And if, for example, even new people could get put in power to some regard, or however that works through course of evolution of time, then you still got the same setup. It's people in power and people that don't have any power. Okay, but like I said, what they did over here was not only are they not letting you have any real power to decide anything, but they're using the concept of telling you that of conning you into believing that you do have power based on the system that they have set up to control you with. It's even worse than we thought. It's worse. I wonder sometimes if what we have now is not worse than the old country. I wonder if the love divine condition and the third coming and on up love divine condition is not worse than what we had in the message. I wonder. There again, I'm not saying it's like when I was trying to figure out whether, well, was the beginning of the revolution, was it a holy thing or no? It's debatable. It's debatable. And in my opinion, it's debatable as to whether we're better off now than we were. It's debatable. Okay. So anyway, but they use that as a means of control. They use the concept of telling you that you are God as a means of control for them to stay in power. Whenever they tell you that you're God, and that is what they sell you. And, everybody's going to be like, oh, I'll send my money for that. Yeah, I'll send a little bit of money if I got a little bit of money. I'm going to hit like on Facebook, and I'm going to send them, I'm going to sacrifice, I'm going to make my ritualistic sacrifice to them. And I'm going to sacrifice my time and my money, and I'm going to send it to this setup. Okay. So anyway, it's the same thing over again. It's you have no power. And furthermore, it's amazing that it's always, it's like these churches, they were conning everybody into thinking that they had all the power, and then they would get them to send their time, put in their time, their money, whatever. They make a sacrifice of themselves, essentially. It's a human sacrifice of themselves, essentially, to that model of things. And that's what you're doing here. You're making a human sacrifice of your own self to that ideology that says that through this ideology you have got power, and you don't have any power. You never had any power. They're not going to give you any power. The rich and people that think up this stuff, that are, whether they're in the the rich landowners in the natural and the rich landowners of the spiritual out here, okay, of course they won't tell you that, because they'll say, oh, well, no, that's not true, Brother Cook, because, see, we gave everybody the right to vote. Horse shit. Yeah, you did give everybody the right to vote, but you made sure and take away any power that they ever had whenever you gave it away from them, and then you used the right to vote as a means to control them with. That's exactly what you did. I say, oh, no, we don't have any people. Horse's ass. You still got them. You're still controlling them just the same as you did back then, just the same as the message did, just the same as the king did. And it's arguably even worse now. Now you've got them convinced. Now not only, see, back in those days, maybe they thought, hey, well, maybe they just come to the conclusion, well, we've got a king and that's just how it is, but they didn't like it. Okay, now they come over here, and now they've got everybody convinced that they have power, and they're ignorant. It's worse. They're ignorant. They're blissfully ignorant. They're happy about the fact that they've made them through this weaving of this thing, through them telling them that they have power and giving them a false power. They are blissfully ignorant. They think, oh, well, we got to, they're happy about the fact that they're being controlled. Essentially, that's what's going on. Because they think, through the message, through the love divine third coming message, they are controlling them. And not only or they, back in the day, they might have grumbled about it, having to pay their tithes or whatever to the message church, but whenever they were under the king. But now, under democracy, they're happy about it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna donate to this campaign or that campaign, and it don't matter. It's just sacrifice, just political donations to some. That's all going to the same thing, and the rich landowners rule everything, and it's the same in the message. It's the love divine spiritual landowners, spiritual mind owners. They're controlling everything while telling you that you have power. And then you think this is the greatest thing ever. Well, I'll make sure and send them a little bit of money, or I'll make sure and sacrifice a little bit of my time or whatever to do, to associate with this. I don't understand how gullible you all people can be. It's so unbelievably. This is easy. This is like level 1 enlightenment. Okay? Just to mention, George Carlin. Okay? George Carlin was a very famous comedian in the United States, for those of you who don't know him. He was saying this stuff. Like, look up George Carlin and voting rights and this and that. He was saying this stuff like probably 30, 40 years ago. Okay? It just blows me away. It's about time somebody said this in the spiritual too. It blows me away. I don't know why. That should be the easiest thing to figure out. You all are just, but that's what it is though. That's what it is. And they keep putting on this charade, and everybody just eats it up. And these love divine people, they just go right on eating it up, and you can't tell them any different. And then all these people out here in the the natural people, whether they're love divine, thinking in natural terms or whatever, whenever they talk about politics and this and that, and they just go right on loving it and say, oh man, that right to vote, that's so important. Yeah, bullshit. It's not, it's a joke. That's only a means of control. Not only is it not important, it's a means of control. It's a way to make you happy about the fact that you're being controlled. God, it's unbelievable. And the same thing, you're still controlled. Your mind is still controlled by the love divinic message. And you're happy about it. My gosh, people, wake up. Wake up. Okay. Like I said, I don't plan on having any friends by the end of this one, right? So anyway. So, let me talk about one other little thing. Here's another reason, the whole thing. Oh, I was going to give a few examples as to the whole why your vote doesn't count. Okay. The greatest example, without me having to explain anything, or without me having to show any examples, is that A, rich people are not going to give up power. What the hell were you people thinking? That was never going to happen. Okay, and B, there are several examples that they have made blatant. Like, for example, all these, super delegates in the Democratic Party, all of the, that's a blatant attack on your right to have any whatever, or that the delegates, I think it used to be that in the Republican Party in West Virginia, I don't know if it's still the same, but I think that whenever we would give up the delegates, because I remember one year they voted for Mike Huckabee. He was running. And the people of West Virginia did not even get to vote on that. It was that the Republicans, the bigwig Republicans in Charleston, they voted in Mike Huckabee. Now, don't get me wrong, it's probably who everybody would have wanted in West Virginia was Mike Huckabee, but in their defense. But when they were running in the Republican primary that year. But it still goes to show that in these primaries, to get up to pick the guy who is not going to do anything anyway, because he's controlled by the powers that be. He's just stuck there. They just stick those guys there to make you think that you have the power to choose your own destiny, one over the other. Even in the primaries, they were like obvious about the fact that they didn't give a crap about the people. Through the super delegates or for the delegates that were voting, they made it obvious. It's like You can't even get on the debate stage unless you're rich, the whole thing. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Anybody with a brain would know that you don't have any right to pick who would actually do anything. I had to laugh at the fact, or who would actually maybe change anything on your better behalf. Okay, here's another thing. Whenever RFK was running, I had to laugh at this one. RFK, I think, eventually figured out, he's like, okay, I'm not going to get in here. They're not going to let me on a debate stage. RFK had a following. He had like a respectable following, a polling following, of like 10% or better, something like that. So they claimed 10-15%. Okay, he had probably money coming in. He had, I'm sure he did. He had, I don't know how much compared to the other ones, but he had money coming in. He had the ball rolling. Okay, and they wouldn't let him in. And he was probably a light version of somebody. He would have just probably changed things in a light manner compared to somebody who would really change things, who would never even have a chance. RFK didn't even have a chance, and he's just a light version of some actual change, to change one's whatever. Okay, they wouldn't even let him on a debate stage. So it's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. It's a joke. And it's just set up to make dare I say, gullible people believe that they have power and to control their minds even more. Okay, so anyway, there's some examples. That's just some examples. But like I said, the main example is rich people in power ain't gonna give up power. Any idiot would know that. Okay, so here's another thing. Since I've done that one, let me explain this. Democracy, here's another thing you must understand. Yeah, that supersedes all that. I've got the next part I'm going to tell, and I couldn't tell it last time, but the next part I'm going to tell supersedes all this. Okay, my whole last sermon and this sermon, up to this point, what I'm getting ready to tell you next will supersede all of it. I just went through that to clarify what I meant last week. Okay, so that should clarify the situation. But really, not only is the thinking you have power in your right to vote, it not only is that nonsense, but it gets even worse. Let me explain this to you. A lot of people, they're all hardcore conservatives, and I have to laugh at them because they're like, we believe in democracy and we believe in the right to vote and all this and that. Maybe they're not Democrats, maybe they're Republicans, but it's democracy nonetheless. And I mean that in terms of republic and democracy. But nonetheless, they're all like, they're like, well, we've got to defend democracy. We've got to be the arsenal of democracy. We've got to defend the right to vote. Okay, for one thing, that's a left-wing ideology in terms of world politics. Now I'm moving out to world politics. We're getting out of our little American echo chamber tunnel here, and we're going to do world politics. We're going to move out to something that's really, really going to clarify it, really going to change the whole tone of things. Because, see, the Americans are very bad about living in an echo chamber. All they hear is their own media. They don't know anything outside of their own stuff. They're a joke around the world because of that. They don't know world politics. They don't know nothing. They just know, Republicans versus Democrats, which is meaningless itself. So anyway, but you have to understand, in terms of world politics, democracy, the concept of democracy, the concept of voting for your leadership and not having an authoritative dictator or somebody that just, has power, one guy who has power. Voting for a legislative body is that, democracy, essentially. The Western democracy, we call it Western liberal democracy, but of course the Americans don't understand. They associate liberalism with something else. It's like you can't explain socialism to them because they associate it with communism. And then the Chinese would probably call or whoever would call socialism capitalist. I'll get to that. But anyway, in the Western liberal democracy, it's what it's called. We'll call it for the Americans, so it'll be palatable to the Americans. We'll call it the Western democracy. For them, they don't understand that in world politics, Western democracy is liberalism. Okay, voting for a legislative body, in theory, if it really meant something, which if it really actually did change something, which it doesn't, but if it did, then that's liberalism. Liberalism, the left wing of governments is democracy. Okay, the right wing of governments is authoritarianism or a dictatorship or something like that. Okay, that's why that Athens, back in the days of ancient Greece, they were like the most liberal society anywhere in the world, probably, because they had democracy. They voted for, and Athens is associated with liberalism in the ancient world more than any other country, probably. Okay, so that's why it was, because it was democracy. So it's a liberal Western democracy. Okay, so you got to understand something. The point here is not to be on a left or a right. The point here is not to be in a democracy. The point here is not to be in a dictatorship. It's neither. Okay, but everybody thinks that they just think, oh, well, democracy is the greatest thing ever. Okay, what did William Branham say? Now, here we go. I'm going to quote William Branham here. What did he say about democracy? He said it was all sails and no anchors, because it was like a ship out there, and it was just the sails blew it whichever way and this way and that way. Okay, in dictatorship, what would that be? All anchors and no sails, right? It's just anchored right there and it don't go nowhere. Okay, so it's useless, and the boat that drifts all over the place, it's useless too, right? Okay, so that's what you have. Okay, so for one thing, everybody needs to get off of that. Okay, they need to get off of the fact that they're overly left-wing in terms of world politics and have made democracy out to be the great savior of everything. If even in theory our democracy actually did give power to the people, which it doesn't, but in theory, what I'm saying, then that's the great savior of everybody's democracy. Okay, let's get fucking real. All right, let's get real. Okay. So anyway, you've got left wing and right wing. Okay, here's another thing. I'm going to stop here just a minute. I've said this before. A lot of people might look at my cussing and be like, well, I don't know if I want to listen to this guy because of cussing. Well, you're probably not going to get my message anyway if that's going to turn you off. And secondly, the theme of it was, the Jesus theme I always thought was that he spoke the common language of the people. So if the common language of the people is to say a few cuss words, then, well, I don't know hardly anybody, common theme of language of people around here that don't say a few cuss words every once in a while. So the idea of this is more, what I'm saying is I'm actually more Christian than you are by by saying this, by speaking the language of the common people. I'm more Christian than you are if you have that opinion. Okay, I am as somebody once put it, whenever it came to my ideas on things, he said that I am not holier than thou, because see, the Pentecostals and all them used to be holier than thou, right? I am unholier than thou. so that might be a better way to explain it. I am unholier than thou. In that I would get out here and cuss. Okay. So anyway, moving on. Let me get back to the story. So I've explained you've got the liberal Western democracy is one end of it, and dictatorship is the other end of it. Okay. Let's go back to World War II just for a minute here. Because I preached these messages years ago about the Second World War, and I was talking about how it applied to the message. Hang on just a sec. Okay, so anyway, so I was talking about how that the Western democracies, and of course the Russians and the Western democracies, France, Britain, United States, and Russia fought against Nazi Germany. Okay, Nazi Germany was the dictator state. Okay, it was the fascist dictator state. And we said, okay, that's the message people. Okay, and I said I compared the Hitler Youth to the message youth camps and et cetera, and the whole 9 yards. It was I think it was the American 8th Air Force that bombed Germany, and don't quote me on that. And they had these. They would send 1,000 bombers. This was in my message years ago, and they would send 1,000 bombers over to bomb Germany, and that was the Millennium Raids. They called it the Millennium Raids. So what was going on then? It was we were essentially bombing the message with the ideology of that we are in the millennium now. That was the third coming theme at the time, right? So anyway, and then the 8th Air Force was the 8th day message, right? It was bombing Germany, and Germany was the Black Eagle, because William Branham's message was an eagle, but it was a black eagle, It was the eagle message, but it was a black dark eagle. That was Nazi Germany. Okay, that was the message people, because their ideology was William Branham, but it was the dark version of it. Okay, all right, that was that's brief recap. Okay, so here's what I got to figure now. So we're the liberal Western democracy, so we were the good guys, right? Okay, well, no. What happened was you have to understand that here's as best I can tell, I believe this is what happened. And I'm of the opinion of this, and I'm of the opinion of this in the spiritual too. See, this is not, it's a different worldview take on things, both spiritually and naturally. Now, if you had all the worldview of the way that, even the natural worldview that most people have, well, I could see how you would be prone to make the common mistakes to have believed the love divine for what it was billed to be. I could understand that. But if you begin to think outside the box, then in the natural, then you're certainly going to take the love divine and look at it and rethink it, because we had it off, had a rough idea of what it related to. So I began to, through getting a different understanding on the natural things, in one way, I began to look at the spiritual situation differently. So anyway, here's what I think what really happened. The Nazi German fascists were fascists with a dictator. Okay, so they were essentially, in world politics terms, right-wing fascists. Okay. What I believe happened was that we, as quote-unquote, if you want to call us we, which, roughly relates, then we as Western liberal democracies that was only code for left-wing fascism. Okay, fascism was not just Nazi Germany, because we always used to say, oh well, we would compare the message to fascists, because everything that was going on, like I said, the Black Eagle, the Gestapo, the message, secret police, the Hitler Youth, the Branham youth groups, etc., everything right down the line, the dictators, the blah 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 blah, all the rhetoric that they were saying, the Nazis were saying, etc., etc. We said, oh, well, they're fascists. They're a dictator, a fascist dictatorship, so they're Nazi Germany. Okay. And we are the Western liberal democracies because we were the third coming at the time or whatever. All right. Here's what happened. We were fascists. We were left-wing fascists. Okay. There's a term for it now called rainbow fascism, essentially. And rainbow fascism is not exactly the best way I could use to describe this, but for lack of a better way to look at it, you've got, the left-wing liberal democracies in which we live, the most extreme left end of it, especially, is like now you've got a right-wing element within the Western liberal democracies, but you have a left-wing element too, and the left-wing element is essentially rainbow fascism, because it's fascism. Like the Democrats essentially are blatantly obvious fascists in the way that they approach free speech, the way that they approach, they're fascistic in the way that they approach free speech and the ideas on that. And they are rainbow fascists in that rainbow is like they've got all, they were the ones that, what rainbow refers to is liberal social policies in general. I'll put it as that. Okay. So what you have is somebody coined the term rainbow fascists. Okay. So what you have is that essentially the liberal Western democracies, Britain, France, the United States mainly, what they was they were really always left wing. Hitler was a right wing fascist. We, as liberal Western democracies, were just left wing fascists. That was all that was going on. We have all the same traits of Nazi Germany, the whole thing. It's just done and you could say, oh, well, the right wingers don't believe that in the United States. Yeah, they do. They do. They really believe the same thing because it's all encompassed under, let's just say that the left wingers in the United States are more of an example of rainbow fascism, but the right wingers in the United States are right wingers under a left wing umbrella. And that's why I said earlier I was done talking about right and left in the United States and talking about world politics now. So under the umbrella, the United States, Britain, and France were basically under the umbrella of the umbrella of, regardless of their internal politics, were under the umbrella of liberalism and fascism. They were fascists too. Okay, that's why that they do. That's why that they don't have, you don't have the right to free speech in any of those countries, really. I mean, you have the right to free speech, but you don't really have the right to free speech. I mean, that was what RFK was fussing about, So anyway, so that's fascism. That's what it is. It's all these things, all this, everything down to like probably summer camps or stuff like that. It's like the Hitler Youth. It's like the left-wing version of Hitler Youth. I mean, everything here is just a left-wing version of everything that Hitler was doing. It's a left-wing version of Nazi Germany. Okay, it's a left-wing fascistic version of the right-wing version that Nazi Germany was doing. Everything that you had there, you have over here in a left-wing version. Okay, this was not a holy cause, folks. This was just left-wing fascism against right-wing fascism was what was going on there. And the left-wing fascists were quite happy to make friends with the Russians, apparently, in World War II, the Soviet Union in World War II, because, they had some, I guess the idea was that the Russians had some left-wing ideologies of their own. So, well, gee, we'll just, we'll get them, we'll help them to fight the right-wing fascists that we don't like, and we'll take them out that way. That was the idea, I assume. So, and I'll give you an example. See, this is more, I think this is a better take on the Second World War, not only spiritually but naturally, because we always just had it as, America, Britain, and France, and Russia against Germany. Okay, Germany and Italy. Okay, which are the two main right-wing fascist countries, Mussolini and Hitler, Germany and Italy. Okay, so we always had it as, well, it was just those against those. Okay, so, and, but really a better explanation for all this is that, it's like this. If at the end of the war, why didn't everything go good? Why didn't everything go, why was there ever a Cold War after World War II? And the reason was because there was a Cold War before World War II, because the West didn't get along with Russia then, and they didn't get along with them after the war was over either. So they were never on the same side as them. In fact, in many ways, the West agreed more with Germany against Russia. Okay, so whenever they fought World War II, there were often times that that the West was actually more in agreement with with Germany, with Nazi Germany, than Russia. Okay, so anyway, it's well, probably before, during. That's hard to explain, but that's pretty much the fact. And what I say is this: really, truly, I'm not exactly sure who the Russians are. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm going to tell you in my mind what I know of it. I got some ideas on the Russians, but let me just say this. The fact is that we want to make it to where that if anybody who studied World War II and really knows what the heck was going on, we wanted to make it to where that the West was totally opposed to Germany. Okay, well, it was more like one of those cases to where they were all under the umbrella of fascism, but they were opposing sides within it. And it's kind of more like we want to make the Pharisees and the Sadducees, use this for an example. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were diametrically opposed to each other, but they were really all under the same, they were all going to crucify Jesus, right? Okay, so that's more like what it really was. It's the West was the Pharisees or the Sadducees, and Germany was the Pharisees or the Sadducees, whichever one opposite. But they really all disagreed vehemently, but they all agreed at some level. So let's tell it more like it really was. So anyway, they agreed on fascism, is what I believe. They just had a left-wing version of it and a right-wing version of it. And in my opinion, I think if we put that over in the spiritual terms, what you find is that the message and the love divine, the third coming love divine side of things, they were diametrically opposed. One side was left-wing. The love divine, third coming version of things, side of things, was left-wing fascism. And the message ideology of things was right-wing fascism. And they totally were diametrically opposed to each other, but really they all agreed on the way to control things. Because now we find that out to be true. Because you have no right to free speech in this message. They're not going to there's no right to free speech. Okay. That, you can say whatever that the spiritual state allows you to say. Like you could get on there and say, "Oh, I love the message," or something. If a message was preached, you could get on there and say that, but you can't get on there and have any sort of disagreement of sorts. Your message will be deleted, okay, or whatever. That they're going to shut it down. There's no right to free speech in the love divine, okay, but they under the guise that they claim that you do have it, and that's what you're fighting for, which is baloney. But anyway, in the message, we're not going to let you have the right to free speech either, obviously, because we came out of it. We know that. So it was all fascism. The whole thing was fascism. The love divine is nothing but left-wing, rainbow, left-wing fascism. Left-wing fascism is a better explanation. So we as left-wing fascists fought the message and defeated them and bombed them to smithereens with the millennium message and the 8th day message and all this and that. We bombed message Hitler to death, okay, just so that we could be left-wing fascists and have all the same issues that we had there in a left-wing form. And that's what we have now in the love divinism. And I've been talking about the whole democracy and how that it was a joke. And it's just a left-wing version. You have no power to pick anybody. The rich people will tell you who and what you're going to, who's going to be whatever. And it's just like it's just a left-wing version of a dictator, because a dictator is in power and he tells everybody what to do, and that's that. Okay, so that was the message God idea. The message. The head vicar of the pastor of the church, he tells everybody what to do, and that's that dictatorship. Okay. And then we got over here and we said, no, we're going to have a democracy. We're left-wing fascists over here in the third coming. and we're going to make it to where you get to vote for your elected leader. So you're all gods, except for the fact that it didn't do any good because you still don't have any power. You just have the theoretical right to vote for no use at all, as I explained earlier. Okay, so you have democracy versus dictatorship, but it's all under the umbrella of fascism. And that's what's going on with the low divine. It is nothing but fascism. It was never anything but fascism, but it was left-wing fascism, and that's why it fought the message people. But it was all fascism. We're still under fascism. The love divine is nothing but fascism. It's left-wing fascism. It's democracy. Everybody's God, but it's still under fascism. You don't have any power. You don't have no more power than to say anything or do anything under that system than those people in the message did. You don't have any more power to say or do anything over here in this, than the people in Nazi Germany did. It's the same thing. Okay, so now that only leaves me with really one question: Who the hell are the Russians? I haven't quite got that figured out yet, and I don't know if they represent maybe just the general populace that's kind of like outside of the message in general. I'm not sure. I don't know I don't understand that exactly yet, but it could relate to some of us. I'm not exactly, I assume, since I don't know if we are all left-wing fascists, or perhaps some of us were of a Russian mentality. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that the Russians were correct, because obviously, anybody that knows Russian history knows that they weren't exactly, they had a lot of issues themselves. So, but here's another thing. Here's some things that got me to think this. A, it's pretty obvious. B, during this Ukraine war, the Russians kept calling the West Nazis. Okay, and I was like, well, how could you call the West Nazis? We fought against the Nazis, and how could you even apply that? Because the whole thing's under the umbrella of fascism. Okay, in World War II, here's what the German soldiers were saying, or at least I heard this story. There were some Americans that met up with these German soldiers, I recall, they were fighting in Italy. And when the Americans and the British landed on the boot of Italy and were going up Italy. And they met up with this German soldier, and I don't know if he had surrendered or whatever. But they had a conversation, and that German soldier told them, he said, here's what's going to happen. He said, Germany is eventually going to get to breaking point, and then Germany is going to take sides with Britain and America, and we're all going to fight the Russians together, because the Russians were coming in towards Germany at that point. Okay, so that was their mentality. That gives you some idea as to their mentality, because they knew back then that they were all under the same umbrella, that Germany, Britain, France, United States were all under the same umbrella of the fascistic way of doing things. It's just left-wing and right-wing, and that's why that we never got called fascist, because it was left-wing fascism, but that's what it was. And they knew that. They knew that they were just left-wing and right-wing of the same thing, and then by the way, the Russians happened to be fighting the Germans. That's kind of how it went. So anyway, in short, if we're all nothing but fascists, this whole side is nothing but fascists, and you could say, oh, well, that's Russian propaganda. Well, I'm not oblivious to the fact that could be a possibility, but I don't find that to be true. I was already tracking along those lines, probably before I'd ever even heard that they were trying to call the whole West Nazis. Okay. Not only that, I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but the European Union, see, what the Nazis tried to do in World War II was they tried to set up a central European government. And they wanted all the Europeans to be under one flag, essentially, one currency, the whole 9 yards, which is the modern equivalent of the European Union now. Okay, and then they fought the British the English, and that I watched some of the pilots that was telling after that, they said, we didn't want to have to fight, the German pilots, they said, we didn't want to have to fight the English, we just wanted them to understand that they had to join us essentially. And they had to join the European Union essentially before the European Union existed. Okay, so what happened was, because a lot of those guys in all those countries that the Germans had conquered, a lot of them sent troops to the Eastern Front to fight the Russians, to help the Germans fight the Russians. So they looked at themselves, after Germany had conquered them, they looked at themselves as part of a great European Union, a great Aryan or whatever European Union, okay, that was against the Russians. Okay, so Germany was just, the way they were looking at it to some degree, they were just trying to unite Europe against the common enemy, the Russians. Okay, so anyway, but it essentially was the precursor to the European Union. So then the European Union is formed. Okay, well, gee, isn't that funny? So the Europeans ended up doing exactly what the Nazis were trying to do. You know, they ended up forming a European Union, exactly what the Nazis were trying to do, but it was probably more left wing than what the Nazis had attempted to do, and more left wing. And so anyway, but it ended up happening. The Nazis really didn't lose the war, in a sense, because the European Union did exactly what they were trying to do. That's what they were trying to do. Okay, and that's what you have now, and that's what we're doing now. That's what all this stuff is going on now. And so anyway, also I saw on a podcast, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but they said that the original leaders, like for the first something like 30 some years or something like that of the European Union, I don't know just exactly, but a lot of the leaders just happened to be former Nazis, former like probably SS Nazis or whoever, high-ranking Nazis, just happened to be the leaders, ended up being the leaders of the European Union. Well, gee, isn't that funny? You know? So, you know, to suggest that, you know, I don't think it's such a crazy suggestion to suggest that the EU and America isn't, in fact, just left-wing fascism. You know, I mean, it's not far-fetched to believe that. It's so if so what I'm saying is that if the whole thing is just fascism, then do you think your vote's going to matter? I mean, voting for an American president is just when the Americans themselves weren't going to give you any power, and then not only that, it's all encompassed under the umbrella that goes from California to Poland of NATO, of the European Union NATO fascistic umbrella of things. Okay, do you think that voting in some election in the United States when you have no power there any at all matters at all whenever the whole thing's really just under the umbrella of fascism? Get fucking real, folks. Get fucking real. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of all this stupidity. I'm tired of this gullibility in the message. I'm tired of this gullibility of people out here that can't understand anything. And then, but it's the same thing in the message, because do you think that your opinion on trivial matters in the love divine matter whenever the whole thing from love divine all the way over to the message is nothing but spiritual fascism? That's exactly what it is, because that's what I was saying in the natural. That's what I was saying in the political. That's what happened. It was just all fascism. We didn't know that we were fascists. We didn't know that we were left-wing fascists whenever we fought against the right-wing message Nazis. Okay? And then it all turned into NATO and the European Union. And America, the European Union, NATO, it's all essentially one block. Okay, so it's fascism from California to Poland. It's fascism from Jeffersonville, Indiana, all the way to Visayas in the Philippines, folks. The whole thing is fascism. The whole spiritual message is spiritual fascism. And so that's what happened. We fought a war of right-wing and left-wing fascism, and we didn't end up, we're just left-wing fascists is all we are. The love divine is nothing but a bunch of left-wing fascists. That's all it ever was. It was never anything other than that. And that's why that I'm like, it's a joke. It's a joke. Everybody thought, oh, we were really fighting for some holy cause, because that's what they told everybody. And World War II was to fight for the holy cause. Okay. And then the third coming, it was the fight for the holy cause, And it turned out to be nothing but left-wing fascism. You don't have any, you've got all the same issues here in the love divine of every bit of what the Nazis had, because it's fascism. It was the same. It's the same. You got every issue here that you had in the message. It's just fascism. It's the same thing ever. It's just left wing version of it. We were in right wing fascism, which was the church ages, essentially, not just the message, but the church ages. And then what happens? You go into Aquarius, left wing fascism. Pisces and Aquarius are both fascism, as far as I can tell, in a sense. Now there are other ways of looking at that, but that's, it's like Aquarius is your humanitarian version of fascism. Pisces was your feudalistic version of fascism. Okay, that's what you have, but it's all fascism. That's as far as I can tell. That's how it works. So that's why that whenever you all want to talk about all this and that and say, oh well, your vote's important and blah 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 blah, and this spiritual situation's important and blah 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 blah. Yeah, well, okay, but I realize that it's just all fascism. It's just all fascism, folks. Don't get your panties in a wad. It's just it's all fascism. It's all spiritual fascism. So at the end of the day, I don't know what more to say about it. That's just what it is. That's as Americans, as an American slave, as I called myself last week. I am an American slave within the left wing fascism. That's what I am at the end of the day. And I just want you all to understand just what's going on. That way you have a better idea of what you're really dealing with. I'm not, I don't know exactly how to put this, but I'm not saying that it shouldn't be what it is. I'm just, because it has to be what it is. Okay. I'm just saying, hey, this is what it is. That's it. I'm not trying to suggest anything. I'm just saying this is what it is. I'm just calling attention to this is what it is, so that people just won't be, I just want some people to wake up and recognize, really, I just wanted to wake up and recognize, hey, it's not exactly what we had it thought out to be. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not saying we need to change anything. I'm saying, I'm just simply saying this is what it is. That's it. Okay? At the end of the day, I'm going to go back to work tomorrow, and, I'm going to continue to pay my taxes, and, and and I can say the same in the spiritual. At the end of the day, I suppose I'm going to go back to work and continue to pay my taxes in the spiritual, and et cetera, et cetera. But, but I just wanted to say this to maybe make some people aware as to what's going on. So, or as best I can tell what's going on anyway. So anyway, I guess that's basically it. So peace out, I guess.